From the Anamkara, a book of Celtic wisdom by John O'Donohue, A Spirituality of Transfiguration. Spirituality is the art of transfiguration. We should not force ourselves to change by hammering our lives into any predetermined shape. We do not need to operate according to the idea of a predetermined program or plan for our lives. Rather, we need to practice a new art of attention to the inner rhythm of our days and lives. This attention brings a new awareness of our own human and divine presence. A dramatic example of this kind of transfiguration is one all parents know. You watch your children carefully, but one day they surprise you. You still recognize them, but your knowledge of them is insufficient. You have to start listening to them all over again. It is far more creative to work with the idea of mindfulness rather than with the idea of will. Too often people try to change their lives by using the will as a kind of hammer to beat their life into proper shape. The intellect identifies the goal of the program, and the will accordingly forces the life into that shape. This way of approaching the sacredness of one's own presence is externalist and violent. It brings you falsely outside yourself, and you can spend years lost in the wilderness of your own mechanical spiritual programs. You can perish in a famine of your own making. If you work with a different rhythm, you will come easily and naturally home to yourself. Your soul knows the geography of your destiny. Your soul alone has the map of your future. Therefore, you can trust this indirect, oblique side of yourself. If you do, it will take you where you need to go, but more important, it will teach you a kindness of rhythm in your journey. There are no general principles for this art of being, yet the signature of this unique journey is inscribed deeply in each soul. If you attend to yourself and seek to come into your presence, you will find exactly the right rhythm for your own life. The senses are generous pathways that can bring you home. A renewal, indeed a complete transfiguration of your life, can come through the attention to your senses. Your senses are the guides to take you deep into the inner world of your heart. The greatest philosophers admit that to a large degree, all knowledge comes through the senses. The senses are our bridges to the world. Human skin is porous. The world flows through you. Your senses are large pores that let the world in. By being attuned to the wisdom of your senses, you will never become an exile in your own life, an outsider lost in an external spiritual place that your will and intellect have constructed. So, what does this passage mean to me? What do I glean from it? What are my takeaways? I think the most salient sentences, hey, that's a good band name, are from the second paragraph, where the author talks about how it is far more creative to work with the idea of mindfulness rather than with the idea of will. I imagine he's speaking of the will of society, of our peers, of our culture, of the superego, the pressure that we put on ourselves and that is placed upon us to be a certain way, perform a certain way, act a certain way. That if you are a spiritual person, you all have this by this age, or do that by that age. like we're taking a prescription for spirituality. And he's saying that's not a uniform solution for everyone. It's important to pay attention to who you are. That's what spirituality is. It's not a wide brushstroke that encapsulates everyone with one medication. And I very much agree with that. Everyone walks their own spiritual path. You cannot really tell anyone anything. Everyone has to learn it for themselves and listen to themselves. So I think that mindfulness, which is what he's suggesting, is extremely important. He speaks to the idea that people often try to change their lives by using the will as a kind of hammer to beat their life into proper shape. The intellect identifies the goal of the program, and the will accordingly forces the life into that shape. So this is where I feel like an amalgam of what he's saying to make room for. What he's saying is not to adhere to any container, to shape of any structure. Kind of like Bruce Lee says, be like water. To flow, to be in the flow, to be in spiritual grace is to be like water. And I agree with that. However, when it comes to reforming one's life, which I'm wont to do, I believe that having conscious intention, which is gathered from mindfulness, which is what he suggests, and comes from my heart, it is important to use the heart and the mind, the intellect, to follow a path. Otherwise, I will be distracted. I'll hear something from my right and walk in that direction, and then realize, oh, what's that over there in the other direction? I'll end up walking in circles and going on tangents without really making progress in any direction. And it's important to make progress in a direction for me because I need to follow what I value. And a lot of times my behavior is not in line with my values because I unconsciously, and I try to be conscious of it, am prone to emotional reasoning. So I want to feel a particular way. And so I soothe myself by using coping mechanisms to negotiate the difficulties in my life. But what I value is in actually moving through those difficulties and sitting with the discomfort. And that's kind of what making this video or this recording and uploading it to YouTube is about, is for me being more creative and sharing my thoughts out loud, even if it's just a recording to myself that I can play back in the future, or just to have for posterity, or for anyone else who's reading Anam Kata and is wondering what other people think. I read books often on my own, and it's always wonderful to hear other people's ideas, and these are some of mine.